Would you like to be the President of the United States?
I really don't believe I would run it. I would love and I would dedicate my life to this country, but I see it as being a mean life, and I also see it that somebody with strong views and somebody with the kind of views that are maybe a little bit unpopular, which may be right, but may be unpopular, wouldn't necessarily have a chance of getting elected against somebody with no great brain but a big smile. And that's a sad commentary for the political process.
Today, he sunk $95,000 into a full-page newspaper ad appearing in many papers criticizing the administration's foreign policy. Rumblings in the Trump camp point as far as the presidency. Could the Manhattan magnate be eyeing the White House, or is he just calling a bluff? Are you a Republican, Donald?
I'm a Republican, yes.
So if there were politics, it would be as a Republican.
It would be, I guess, as a Republican, but I don't see that there will be politics. This is making other people live like kings, and we're not.
Why are you involved in politics at all?
I enjoy it. I enjoy the system. I doubt I'll ever be involved in politics beyond what I do right now, but I do enjoy the system. I find it a really beautiful thing to watch. It's
the rumors that you were going to run were wrong?
Oh, I was never going to run. I mean, I made the mistake of going up to New Hampshire, a place that I love, and doing a friend a favor and making a speech for him. It got tremendous publicity. It was one of my good speeches, by the way. It got tremendous publicity and tremendous crowds. And all of a sudden, everybody thought I was going to run for president. And it was very flattering and everything, but I never had any intention, and I won't be running for president.
And I'll add one additional thing. I watched the Republican debate last night, and I'll tell you what, if the right person was debating against whoever the winner of that group is, they'd have a major impact on the election, because that was not a very inspiring group of people that I was watching last night.
We have to get the momentum back, and we have to get it back quickly before it's too late, before we waste that incredible potential that we still have. Ladies and gentlemen, I am officially running for President of the United States, and we are going to make our country great again.
Where did this begin?
With us, you're fired. You're fired. You're fired. You're fired. You're all fired. All four are fired.
Did it start here? In the winter of 2004, with the airing of the first episode of The Apprentice.
My name's Donald Trump, and I'm the largest real estate developer in New York. I own buildings all over the place, model agencies, the Miss Universe pageant, jetliners, golf courses, casinos, and private resorts like Mar-a-Lago, one of the most spectacular estates anywhere in the world.
Donald Trump appeared as the version of himself he most wanted to project, the successful businessman with a luxurious lifestyle who people were dying to impress. The Apprentice led a whole new generation to Donald Trump, and he was able to re-establish himself in the mainstream as a ruthless real estate mogul attuned to success. He became a personification of raw capitalism, the money-making machine that disposed of the lowest performers and rewarded those that could escape the corporate jungle he had designed. He became a brand, a hollow representation of wealth that could be licensed to the highest bidder. This brand is what Trump ultimately relied on to catalyze his presidential campaign in 2015. Donald Trump won because his rise was the manifestation of the American dream, the notion that anyone can become anything with the right work ethic and determination to succeed. In many ways, Trump's rise became our rise because he was the politically uninitiated, just like the rest of us. His struggle to be accepted by the political class became our struggle, and his political inexperience mirrored our own. He positioned himself as the everyman, despite being a billionaire who had lived his life hidden in immense wealth. We are living in a society that values success as God, and when it came to Donald Trump, their aspirationalism, their desire to be as successful and wealthy as Trump, came to bear on the result. Trump represented the American dream of prosperity and success, and he manipulated the masses' desire for a successful existence in a successful country by positioning himself as the sole resurrector of what he purported was a country that had lost its greatness. Did it start here, with the rise of the internet post-2000? Internet usership expanded by an order of magnitude unprecedented in human history, with the advance of the technological age. With the rise of the internet came a greater proliferation of media, and with this came competition. People were able to gather a multitude of sources from all sides of the political spectrum. Political polarization became entrenched as people began to follow the information that most confirmed their political biases. Trump emerged from the wreckage of the political center and was able to forge an enthusiastic base from the right wing. Did it start here, with the establishment of the Fox News channel in October 1996? Founded by Rupert Murdoch and headed by Roger Ailes, Fox News would go on to become the most watched cable news network in America. Roger Ailes began in entertainment, working for a variety show in the 1960s, before becoming a media consultant for the Richard Nixon and George H.W. Bush presidential campaigns. Through his work for Nixon and Bush, he was able to cement the political divide he would later exacerbate and manipulate at Fox News. He was able to transition New Deal Democrats into Reagan Republicans, and later into Bush supporters following the Reagan presidency by promulgating the Reagan brand of right-wing nationalism and aligning it closely with Republican ideals. It was the sanctification of Ronald Reagan that Ailes reinforced that may have created the conditions for Donald Trump, a celebrity who espoused a combative culture war conservatism and who also used the "Make America Great Again" slogan. The scandals of the Bill Clinton presidency elevated Fox News and shaped it into a ratings juggernaut. The rise of the Tea Party movement, which Fox News fueled, would also lift the channel to enormous profits and influence during the Obama presidency. But it was the impact of Fox News on news in general that may have caused the rise of Donald Trump. Ailes founded modern infotainment in broadcast news, opting instead to hunt for ratings at whatever cost. He chose to pursue sensationalist stories that played upon the emotions of his viewers, and chose to disregard objectivity in favor of partisan spin. As a result, other news channels such as CNN, which moved to the center, and MSNBC, which favored a left-wing approach, were left trailing in the wake of Fox News. Competition meant that they too would move towards sensationalism, favoring neutrality over objectivity, and providing the right wing with a fair assessment despite the oft-repeated liberal bias of the mainstream media, and despite the moral or political inadequacies of their positions. The rise of punditry instead of balanced news reporting became a mainstay of mainstream media, far from the days of Walter Cronkite and Edward R. Murrow. Access journalism became more and more prevalent as the government increasingly provided talking points and access passes to journalists who were left neutered as a result. Journalists began to pay lip service to the dishonesty of partisan politicians as a means of securing the next interview. News proprietors such as Rupert Murdoch began to control the news cycle in public view.
For example, take the war. I'm not just talking about the United States, but in terms of you having a global media enterprise, I mean, have you shaped that agenda at all in terms of perceptions of the war, in terms of how the war is viewed?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we've tried.
Tried in what way?
Well, we basically supported our papers and our television. I would say supported the Bush policy in the Middle East. We've been very critical of its execution. But our support hasn't meant very much, because clearly public opinion now has grown very, very tired of the whole enterprise.
This all led to the partisan divide that Trump entered into in 2015. He railed against the inadequacies of a media landscape that had, over time, come to fail in its goal for accurate reporting.
So let's try it. Are you ready? These people are among the most dishonest people in the world, the media. They are the worst. And just a lot of things came out of that day. It opened up the eyes of the media, even the media that dislikes us all. It opened up their eyes. The media is trying to rig the election by giving credence, and this is so true, by giving credence to false stories that have no validity and make it a front page. They take a story with absolutely nothing that didn't exist, and they put it front page news because they want to poison the minds of the voters.
Did it start with the Kennedy-Nixon debate in 1960, when the persona of politicians began to override their message, and when politics became a contest of public image? Did it start when humans began to make each other into idols, to be praised and worshipped? The sanctification of celebrity played a vital role in Trump's victory. Trump had been famous for decades and was well known by multiple generations. As a result, he built up a substantial name recognition which rivaled Hillary Clinton's, who had built arguably the most powerful political machine in American history. Due to the toxifying of media following the rise of Fox News and the internet, the worlds of entertainment and politics became mixed, as politics began to rival entertainment for ratings. As a result, political satire replaced observational comedy on talk shows, satirical political shows became mainstream commentary, and new political shows are commissioned every cycle. It was this mixture that Trump emerged from, utilizing the power of celebrity and generating controversy he knew would trick media outlets into reporting on him and his campaign. Over the course of the campaign, he has earned close to $2 billion worth of free media attention. The brand he built from The Apprentice translated perfectly into a political brand, and he used the stature of his role to devastating effect in a society that had not yet come to terms with its addiction to celebrity. Did it start here, in 2003, with the Iraq War, when President George W. Bush sent 150,000 soldiers to war to destroy the chemical weapons program of Saddam Hussein, a pretense that was proven to be incorrect? This did not stop key media establishments from leading the march to war and to the deaths of almost 4,500 US service personnel and more than 200,000 Iraqi civilians. Throughout 2002, the New York Times reporter Judith Miller and her colleagues wrote a series of stories about Saddam Hussein's ambition and capacity to produce weapons of mass destruction. Key news establishments eschewed their journalistic responsibility and parroted the government line. They lied to the public, sowing the seeds of distrust amongst the population. The American people were disgusted with the inaccuracy of the reporting and the dishonesty of the political establishment. It was this distrust that laid the foundations of the Trump phenomenon. The Iraq War became deeply unpopular and is largely seen as a colossal foreign policy mistake. Trump utilized the distrust of foreign policy to win the 2016 election, claiming he had been against the Iraq War since the beginning, a claim which was ultimately proven not to be true. He claimed to be an isolationist, a great acclaim from a populace that had grown sick of the same warmongering politicians determined to wade through the quagmire of Middle East politics.
We can't continue to be the policemen of the world. We owe $19 trillion. We have a country that's going to hell. We have an infrastructure that's falling apart, our roads, our bridges, our schools, our airports, and we have to start investing money in our country. End the era of nation building, a disastrous concept, a disastrous era. We have to hit them everywhere. We have to take them out. And I'm somebody that didn't want to go into Iraq because I said you're going to destabilize the Middle East, and I was 100% right. We have to hit them hard. When Obama got out of Iraq, he got out the wrong way. He should have left some behind. He got out the wrong way. We have to hit them hard. They're chopping off heads. I didn't want to go in. In fact, people came from the Bush administration because I was getting a lot. I'm pretty vocal on the fact, don't do it. I said, you're going to destabilize the Middle East. We've spent trillions of dollars in the Middle East, trillions. We shouldn't have ever gone into Iraq. I said it from the beginning. I said it from the beginning. I said you're going to destabilize the Middle East, and we did. And then, an even easier decision, we should have never gotten out the way we got out. And then...
Did it start with the Arab Spring, when a series of anti-government protests, uprisings and armed rebellions spread across the Middle East in early 2011? After the overthrow of the dictatorial regimes of Tunisia, Egypt, Libya and Yemen, many were waiting with bated breath for Syria. The multi-religious, geopolitically significant country is ruled by repressive leader Bashar al-Assad. The first major protests against Assad began in March 2011 in provincial towns, gradually spreading to all major urban areas. Eventually, due to the regime's brutal response to the protests, army defectors began the Free Syrian Army, an armed fighting force against the Assad government. By the end of 2011, Syria slid into an intractable civil war. Syrian families witnessed the collapse of the country into violence and ruin. Hundreds of thousands of people have died since, and 5.1 million Syrians fled the country as refugees, with 6.3 million Syrians displaced within the country. Many fled to other countries in the Middle East, including Turkey, Lebanon and Jordan. 1.3 million Syrians requested asylum in Europe, sparking the European migrant crisis. Many Syrians died in makeshift rafts on their way to their destinations. The Syrian civil war facilitated the rise of ISIS, an al-Qaeda splinter group which aims to create a worldwide caliphate. Trump won because he railed against ISIS. He promised to tackle extremism more strongly than any other candidate, striking a populist nerve which reflected in the magnitude of his rallies. The combination of ISIS attacks across the world and the Syrian migrant crisis created a deep hostility towards Muslims, which Trump used to capture the extremist right of his base.
First of all, I need some clarity on a few issues. Let's start with the Muslim registry controversy. What do you want there? What's your vision?
Well, it's very simple. When they come in from Syria, guest of President Obama, we shouldn't be taking any because we have no idea where they come from, who they are. They have no paperwork. There's no way of proving that their paperwork is correct. When they come in from Syria, I want them to be registered. They have to be registered. We have to watch them because we just don't know who they are. We don't know where they come from. We don't know if they're ISIS, and we don't know if they have evil intentions. So I want them registered. We have evil that lurks around the corner without the uniforms. Ours is harder because the people that we're going against, they don't wear uniforms. They're sneaky, dirty rats. And they blow people up in a shopping center. And they blow people up in a church. These are bad people.
When you're fighting Germany and they had their uniforms, and Japan and they had their uniforms, and they had their flags on the plane and the whole thing, we are fighting sneaky rats right now that are sick and demented, and we're going to win.
But you have to surveil the mosque. I mean, trouble's coming out of the mosques, whether we like to say it or not, whether it's politically correct. I don't care about political correctness. I'm like beyond political. We have taken political correctness to a point where we can't do anything as a country anymore, so I don't care. The problems are coming out of the mosques. We have a lot of problems. They all know what's happening.
So we're going to convene my top generals and give them a simple instruction. They will have 30 days to submit to the Oval Office a plan for soundly and quickly defeating ISIS. We have no choice. Any nation who shares in this goal will be our friend in this mission. For years, we have been caught up in endless wars and conflicts under the leadership of failed politicians and a totally failed foreign policy. And this is a policy that could only happen with incompetent people running our country, believe me. Well, we don't win anymore, folks. We don't win anymore. When did you see us win? We lose on trade. We can't beat ISIS. Oh, by the way, we're going to knock the hell out of ISIS. We're going to knock the hell out.
Overseas, ISIS has carried out an absolute atrocity, and one after another. Children slaughtered, girls sold into slavery, men and women burned alive. Crucifixions, beheadings, and drownings. Ethnic minorities targeted for mass execution. Holy sites desecrated. Christians driven from their homes and hunted for extermination. ISIS rounding up what it calls Nation of the Cross, Nation of the Cross, in a campaign of absolute and total genocide. We cannot let this evil continue.
Did it start here, on Wall Street in 2008, when the government bailed out investment banks such as AIG and Bear Stearns, and government-sponsored enterprises such as Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac at the height of the subprime mortgage crisis? Or in 1999, as President Bill Clinton signed into law the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, which repealed the Glass-Steagall Act, which separated commercial and investment banking. US households lost on average nearly $5,800 in income due to reduced economic growth from September 2008 through to the end of 2009. Costs to the federal government due to its interventions to mitigate the financial crisis amounted to $2,050 on average for each US household. The crisis resulted in a global downturn in economic activity, causing increases in unemployment, a fall in business profits, and increases in government's budget deficits. The consequences of the Great Recession were dire for social stability. Many felt that the government was to blame for deregulating the banks and allowing them to balloon until they were too big to fail. Many also felt that the government had failed by not prosecuting those who were to blame for the financial crisis. Distrust in the establishment was high after 2008 and continued to swell as the effects of the crisis continued to wreak havoc on the country. Trump seized on the anti-establishment fervor built up by the 2008 financial crisis and rode to victory on the back of disenfranchised victims of corporate and financial greed.
There is nothing the political establishment will not do, no lie that they won't tell, to hold their prestige and power at your expense. And that's what's been happening.
All of the special interests who are used to getting their way, and I fully understand that, to pay very close attention. I want the entire corrupt establishment to hear and heed the words we are all about to say. If we win,
on November 8th, we are going to Washington, D.C., and we are going to do what? Drain the swamp. It is so corrupt. Our failed political establishment has delivered nothing but poverty at home and disaster overseas. They get rich, making America poor. It's time to reject a media and political elite that's bled our country dry. It's finally time for us to fight for America. We're going to fight for America. I'm not a politician. My only special interest is you. You know,
or did it start in 1994 with the signing of the North American Free Trade Agreement? Donald Trump's election was a battle axe in the heart of the establishment, thrown by disenfranchised citizens willing to destroy the system for the sake of change. They had been left behind by the tides of economic and industrial transformation. Their jobs had been shipped overseas, and trade deals such as NAFTA and the then incoming Trans-Pacific Partnership had sidelined American workers in favor of cheaper labor abroad. NAFTA, which had been signed by Bill Clinton, had left a powerful legacy in the Rust Belt region, a legacy that would be absorbed by his wife Hillary in the 2016 election.
I think my husband did a pretty good job in the 1990s. I think a lot about what worked and how we can make it work again.
Well, he approved
3 million
NAFTA.
new jobs,
He approved
a balanced
NAFTA,
budget,
which is the single worst trade deal ever approved in this country.
Incomes went up for everybody. Manufacturing jobs went up also in the 1990s, if we're actually going to look at the facts.
The Rust Belt, named so because of the deindustrialization and urban decay of the region and its previous status as the industrial heartland of America, includes parts of New York, Michigan, Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio, and Indiana. Apart from Illinois and New York, all the Rust Belt states voted for Trump. It was the competition for labor, job losses, and outsourcing that fueled the distrust of the establishment in these areas, and which ultimately carried Trump over the line with his condemnation of NAFTA and his anti-free trade rhetoric.
all you have to do is open your eyes. Hillary Clinton has nothing to offer but the same tired defense of the same failed establishment. She's merely a vessel for her friends, the donors, and the special interests. Hillary Clinton's a representative for globalists. You know what globalists are? Who want to strip the jobs and the wealth from our country and give them to every other country. I'm not running to be president of the world. I'm running to be president of you and the United States.
Did it start in 1975 as Margaret Thatcher began to implement the principles of neoliberalism in England, and which later was adopted by the Americans?
I don't find it strange, but some other people do, that we have stopped creating wealth. We've had a large number of increasing restrictions, and you've been finding two things. First, that we are more and more concentrating on redistributing the wealth we've got, rather than creating any more. To create more, you need a slightly freer society.
Neoliberalism, the political and economic philosophy founded by Friedrich Hayek, argues for massive tax cuts for the rich, crushing of trade unions, reduction in public housing, deregulation, privatization, and outsourcing, amongst other things. Trump was able to capitalize on the failure of neoliberalism, which has created a deep division between rich and poor. 8 men, headed by Microsoft's Bill Gates, now control 50% of the world's wealth. The richest 1% owns more wealth than the rest of the planet, and the World Economic Forum has identified economic inequality to be a major threat to social stability. It was economic inequality that led to a distrust of the establishment, which continually augmented the wealth of the top 1%. This came to a head with the Occupy Wall Street protest in September 2011 in Zuccotti Park, located in the Wall Street financial district. The protests focused on economic inequality, political corruption, and the corporate influence over government. The protests spawned copycat protests around the world and helped to cement the growing distrust of the establishment. This distrust had intensified by the time the outsider candidacy of Donald Trump emerged, and it later carried him to victory against Hillary Clinton, who embodied the political establishment in the eyes of many. Did it start when John McCain selected Sarah Palin as his running mate in 2008? By the time they failed to capture the presidency, Palin had struck a chord with the Republican base. After she resigned as governor of Alaska in July 2009, she became an unofficial spokesperson and de facto leader of what became known as the Tea Party movement, a populist grassroots political movement that transitioned into a major player within the Republican Washington establishment. The Tea Party opposed excessive taxation, government intervention in the private sector, and supported stronger immigration controls. It formed around the anger with Obama-era policies, such as the $750 billion stimulus bill of 2009, at the height of the subprime mortgage crisis. The Tea Party galvanized their support upon the death of Ted Kennedy, winning his Massachusetts seat and depriving the Democrats of the 60-vote filibuster-proof majority they had held since July 2009. With this, the Tea Party entrenched the political gridlock that consumed the Obama presidency. Public approval of Congress has dived into the 10s and 20s ever since. Palin led the movement to electoral success in 2010 before its momentum dissipated. Despite this, the Tea Party and the political gridlock it helped to engineer during the Obama years were to prove fundamental in the future of American politics. Herein lies the root of the distrust of the establishment that Trump utilized to win the presidency in 2016. The failure of Washington establishment politics during a Democratic administration was to prove decisive in handing victory to the Republicans, as well as giving them the House and Senate, allowing them to control all branches of government. A keen political observer, Trump built upon the Tea Party movement and learned from their successes. He touted their policies, galvanizing the Republican base to devastating effect in the 2016 election. Did it start with the rise of the right wing in Europe? Amid a migrant crisis, sluggish economic growth, and growing disillusionment with the European Union, far-right parties have been achieving electoral success in a number of European nations. The Alternative for Germany party has called for a ban on the construction of mosques and won up to 25% of the vote in German state elections in March 2016, challenging Germany's consensus-driven politics. The National Front in France has called for the drastic reduction of immigrants allowed into France and finished second place in the 2017 French general election. The Party for Freedom in Holland has called for the closing of all Islamic schools and holds 15 seats in the lower house. The Golden Dawn in Greece, a neo-fascist party which has declared the importance of ethnically clean states, won 18 seats in the parliamentary elections in September 2016. Additionally, Jobbik in Hungary, the Sweden Democrats, the Freedom Party in Austria, and the People's Party in Slovakia have all had electoral success. What caused protest and populist movements to spring up and flourish across Europe? The responsibility may lie at the door of globalization, internationalism, increased travel and trade, and rising migration. It could be the failure of the political class to adequately deal with the problems that the average person faces. Many turned elsewhere to have their interests protected, and many felt a strain with the diversification of the populace, a supposed problem that has been championed by the far right. The bond between elected officials and their constituents fractured as a result of rising economic inequality and the failure to adequately deal with the financial crisis of 2008. The average man or woman in Europe has not felt any major impact of the rising living standards that have taken place across the world, as the benefits of a globalized world have taken root elsewhere. Jobs have been shipped abroad to places such as China, where manufacturing has gone from strength to strength, in comparison with the West, where manufacturing jobs have all but disappeared in lieu of a service-based economy. The rise of the far right in Europe, as well as the Brexit vote in the UK, played a pivotal role in creating the momentum for Donald Trump's victory. Trump played into the fashionable anti-Islamic, anti-immigrant narrative that catered to extremist elements in his base. Or did it start here, 8 years earlier, during the opening of the crucial and highly contested 2008 election season, when Citizens United, a conservative political advocacy organisation, were prevented from broadcasting television advertisements for a film criticising Hillary Clinton? Publicity for the controversial film, entitled Hillary the Movie, was halted by the Supreme Court, which found that the advertising was in violation of the 2002 Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, also known as the McCain-Feingold Act, which barred corporations and unions from soliciting media that mentioned any political candidate in periods immediately preceding elections. Citizens United challenged the ruling, suing the Federal Election Commission. The case was eventually presented to the Supreme Court, which, through the assessment of the use of money in political advertising, ultimately made a ruling on the larger issue of money in politics, with a focus on the practice of campaign finance expenditure. In a 5-4 ruling, the justices declared that the governmental restriction on independent political spending by corporations and unions was unconstitutional, whilst also determining that the anti-Clinton broadcast should have been allowed under the freedom of speech afforded by the First Amendment. The decision, which came to be known as Citizens United versus FEC, ultimately overturned the precedent associated with the governmental regulation of campaign expenditure, and, as a result, has had meaningful ramifications on the financial conduct of corporations and unions and the establishment of super PACs, which serve as outside spending groups and which can accept unlimited donations with questionable transparency requirements.
What is your, maybe you don't even want to touch this, but what is your, as a person, do you worry at all? I know you don't, well, as a person, do you worry at all that there's too much money in politics?
No, you know, I really don't. I forget what the figures are, but I think we spend less on our presidential campaigns each year when there's a presidential election than the country spends on cosmetics. I mean...
Many regard the Citizens United decision as legalizing bribery and corruption within the American political system, and has entrenched a pay-for-play system in which politicians are reliant on donors with competing interests in order to win re-election. As a result of this decision and the legal rulings preceding it, the public have become deeply suspicious of politicians and their intentions. The political class became maligned and distrusted, and it was this distrust that Trump used to rail against the elites, the establishment, and campaign corruption. Trump repeatedly claimed he was self-funding his campaign, to great acclaim from his supporters. He reiterated time after time the corruption of career politicians, and even admitted to personally corrupting politicians with donations.
This is a self-funded campaign. We have our heart in it. We have our soul in it. I don't need money. I don't want money. And this is going to be a campaign like I think no other. I'm not controlled by lobbyists. I'm not controlled by anybody. I'm controlled by the people of the country in order to make our country great again. Yes, sir.
I'm going against the bosses. You know, I used to be a big contributor. I used to be, I guess, one of the bosses in a certain way. I was a member of the establishment. Nobody knows the game better than I do, believe me. I know the game so well. I can go to lobbyists and they have Cruz stamped on their forehead. It says Cruz, I can handle anything. And you give these guys millions of dollars and they go and they produce a vote, and the vote very well could be bad for the country, but it's good for the company or the country that they're representing. We can't do that anymore, folks.
I wasn't supposed to be here. I was a member of the establishment 7 months ago. I gave $350,000 to the Republican Governors Association. I'm not supposed to be doing this. You see, I'm supposed to be on the other side writing checks and having people do whatever I want.
Did it start in 2011 when Trump disputed President Obama's citizenship? Trump claimed that Obama was born in Kenya, making him ineligible for the presidency. Racial undertones aside, Trump used this issue as a way to create a following in the right wing, championing an issue that resonated with the Republican base. It was this following that he built upon later. It was the first instance of Trump championing the forgotten man, a phrase that played a crucial part in his anti-establishment appeal.
I've hit, you know, they call it the forgotten man, and you've heard it, so I add the forgotten man and woman. But these are forgotten people. These are people that are working harder today than they did 18 years ago, and they're making less money, essentially. They're making less money, and they're working harder, and their jobs aren't as good. And in some cases, they have 2 jobs instead of 1. It's no good, and people see that. And when you see massive crowds outside like that, that's what's happening.
Or here, at the 2011 White House Correspondents' Dinner, President Barack Obama stood confidently satirizing the birther-in-chief and host of the reality television show The Apprentice, Donald Trump. Trump sat, a wincing smile spread across his face, visibly shrinking in his chair as the president heaped ridicule onto him. Trump was seething. He and his wife Melania reportedly left after the jeering 10-minute-long mockery of him and his political aspirations. He was being sidelined as a circus attraction, a clown. He left determined for revenge and to show the elites who had once scorned him just what he was capable of. On January the 20th, 2017, 5 years, 6 months, and 22 days after being dressed down by the president, Donald Trump became president himself and immediately began to dismantle the accomplishments of Obama. His presidential aspirations kicked into high gear when he was mocked in front of the world for being a sideshow. He would turn his back on the establishment he had been wedded to since birth and would go on to create a movement to uproot the very people who had treated him as a joke. Did it start when America elected a black president? When the tides of change moved starkly in a liberal direction and many in the right wing were left helpless in the face of a nationwide march towards equality? Or when Hillary Clinton was elected as the Democratic nominee, the first woman to do so in history? It mirrored Obama, a departure from the white male dominance hierarchy and a movement towards equal opportunity, fairness and tolerance. But there were some that held opposing views that disregarded Obama and Clinton on the basis of inalterable attributes such as skin color or gender. The white majority became Trump's forgotten man in the face of change. He promised to fight on their behalf to maintain the systems they had been brought up in, namely a maintenance of white hegemony in social affairs. The advance of political correctness was another factor in his success. The onslaught of identity politics and the effects of a supposed victim culture became fodder for Trump. His tough-talking, no-holds-barred culture warrior stance proved immensely popular with the braying crowds. It was the effects of political correctness that was deemed inappropriate and suffocating, as white people were being censored in a discernible way for the first time. Bigoted Trump supporters were given ample material, such as Trump's criticisms of the black community, Syrian refugees, Mexican immigrants, and his Muslim ban proposal, whilst the non-bigots were those that felt left behind and demonized in a supposedly changing racial landscape that they felt aimed to villainize them as an oppressive force against equality. In this way, Trump created a stranglehold on the spectrum of thought in white communities, positioning himself as both a friend to those that sought to undermine minorities and an enemy to a climate of censorship and restriction that disabled white people from speaking openly. Working-class white men and women voted for Trump in their droves, leaving Clinton to rely on recapturing Obama's 2008 and 2012 Rainbow Coalition. The election of Obama and the nomination of Hillary Clinton may have ignited a disdain for identity politics that may have cost Clinton the election. The effects of political correctness and censorship in general played into Trump's hands. He was the candidate that was unable to be censored, and he spoke openly in a time when people felt their speech was limited, making him a hero to many.
I think the big problem this country has is being politically correct. I've been challenged by so many people, and I don't frankly have time for total political correctness. We're fighting a politically correct war. It's a politically correct war. I mean, you know what's going on. You know what's going on. But, You're better right. You don't want a scripted president. And you don't want a politically correct president because it takes too much long. Takes too much time. We've got to get down to the problems. We can't worry about being politically correct. We just can't afford anymore to be so politically correct. And I'm sure some maybe do.
Do you want to use that word in this forum?
I will, because people want to hear the truth, Frank. I watch you all the time. They want to hear the truth. I mean, exactly what Frank said is what's wrong with our country. We're so politically correct that we can't move anymore. You know? And Frank, we have politically correct. We have to be able to express ourselves.
But don't we go too far?
Too far.
Don't you feel that you went too far in what you called Mexicans coming across the border?
Oh, no, not at all. No, I'm very happy.
You don't think so?
Well, let me tell you, not at all.
Mr. Trump, your comments about banning Muslims from entering the country created a firestorm. According to Facebook, it was the most talked about moment online of your entire campaign, with more than 10 million people talking about the issue. Is there anything you've heard that makes you want to rethink this position?
No. No. Look, we have to stop with political correctness. We have to get down to creating a country that's not going to have the kind of problems that we've had.
Did it start with the FBI investigation of Hillary Clinton? The FBI's investigation of her use of a private email server cast her as a criminal evading justice. Does all this lie on her shoulders? She lost an election against the least popular candidate of all time. She was backed by Wall Street and a multitude of financial interests, whilst her primary opponent, Bernie Sanders, was being funded by millions of small donations from the public. Her corporatism did not stop there. Her speeches to Wall Street banks, in which she confessed to having a public and private position on how they should be treated, evoked disgust amongst members of the public. The Democratic National Committee may have contributed to her loss and Trump's victory, after it was found that Debbie Wasserman Schultz, a key Clinton ally and head of the DNC, had purposefully biased the election process in favor of Clinton and away from the grassroots progressive candidacy of Bernie Sanders, which drew outrage from all sides of the political spectrum and divided Democratic voters when the time came to cast their ballot. The inevitability of Hillary Clinton may have played a part in Trump's victory also. Clinton was seen as the rightful successor to President Barack Obama. Many credible candidates from the Republican establishment, such as Paul Ryan, did not stand, perhaps due to the fact that they were unwilling to confront the Clinton political machine, leaving the Republican field empty of serious competition for Trump. Her inevitability undermined the vote as people stayed home as they believed the outcome was preordained and decided, leading Trump to victory. Did it start on April the 27th, 2016, as Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak attended Trump's first major foreign policy speech at the Mayflower Hotel in Washington, where Trump and Kislyak met for the first time. Here, Kislyak also met Jeff Sessions, the future Attorney General, and discussed policy issues important to Russia. Or on June the 3rd, 2016, when Donald Trump Jr. was promised very high-level sensitive information that would incriminate Hillary as part of Russia and its government's support for Mr. Trump. 4 days later, on June the 7th, Trump announced a speech about Hillary Clinton's corrupt dealings, indicating that he knew about the meeting with the Russians.
But it would be interesting to see. I will tell you this. Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press.
Did it start on July the 27th, 2016, when Trump urged Russia to hack Hillary Clinton's emails, an action that was allegedly carried out? As of now, collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian government has not been proven, though it is highly suspected, with many asserting that it was the cause of Trump's victory and will ultimately be the cause of his future impeachment, though this remains to be seen. How did Trump win? Was it low voter turnout? Was it the electoral college system which was designed to empower slaveholders politically? Was it the arrogance of the liberal elite? Was it the rich voting for tax cuts? Was Trump mentally ill and lost in a mad grab for power? Was it the fault of the Democrats who cheated Bernie Sanders and refused to acknowledge their base? Did the Democrats criticize the wrong things? Was it the resentment of liberalism? Was it the vacant Supreme Court seat? Was it Trump's basic language and short, catchy epithets? Was it WikiLeaks and Julian Assange? Was it gerrymandering? Was it fake news on social media? Was this all James Comey's fault? Or was it simply that many felt the brunt of economic hardship at the hands of banks and trade deals? Does responsibility lie at the feet of those that felt their advantages slipping away as their society was skewing sharply against them and towards equality of opportunity and outcome? Many felt burdened by political correctness and what they saw as censorship. Many believed that they should be treated better than their neighbors due to their nativism and bigotry. They saw in Trump relief. Relief from endless wars. Relief from a failing media landscape. Relief from the inefficiencies of Washington. Relief from a corrupt political system that relied on big donors. Relief from the establishment and the havoc they caused. They saw in Trump the American dream itself, a world in which they too could become president. They saw in Trump an icon of celebrity, the ultimate realization of a society that had increasingly mixed entertainment with politics and allowed them to compete for attention and ratings. The media was lost, trapped in a vicious cycle of ratings grabbing, allowing Trump to make himself into the story of the day on a daily basis. They gave him the oxygen he needed to succeed. They allowed the continual deterioration of the electoral process by reinforcing the popularity contest. They allowed a reality television star into the electoral reality television show that they themselves had built over the decades. They allowed him to make himself into the untouchable candidate. Trump was all things to all men, unafraid of contradiction, successfully steering both sides of the line, and appealing to the working class and the establishment simultaneously. He made the election about themes rather than substance, leveraging his image and his brand to devastating effect. In many ways, the 2016 election was the change candidate versus the wrong candidate. Bernie Sanders could have won for the exact same reasons as Trump, whilst Clinton was left protecting herself from legal and political accusation. The Republicans tolerated Trump because it was their only route to victory, and they could not find a powerful alternative. They were blind to his excesses and allowed him to take control of the GOP purely out of a lust for power. He was the chaos candidate, weathering the perfect political storm. He was disruption. He was anarchy. He was discord. And that is what the people needed. And that is what the people craved. Because history is left only to bow to the revolution. A revolution built on deceit and deception, built on bigotry and hypocrisy, built on innocent hope and aspiring bystanders. Was this all a master plan by Donald Trump? Was he just a madman? A chaos candidate, appealing to the latent desire of the masses to destroy the systems that failed them time and time again. Did he know what he was doing, or did the world catch up with him? We will never really know. What we do know is that in the post-truth world of Trump, many have found a hero. And because of this, his supporters cannot be convinced out of their support, because Trump represents to them hope. Hope for a future without bureaucracy, without corruption, greed, failure. It was this hope that he knowingly exploited. Hope for a world in which they reign supreme, unchallenged, free to impose themselves on others again. And this is most dangerous of all, because one man can take the presidency out of sheer force of personality, but millions of voters who harbor ideas of change can destroy a system that has failed them. And it doesn't matter what side you're on, because in a way, the chaos is beautiful. This is inevitable. This is anger. This is democracy. This is change.
Mr. President-elect,
go ahead.
Can you state
she's
categorically?
asking a question.
Mr.
Don't be rude.
President-elect, can you give us a question?
Don't be
You're
rude.
attacking us. Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude. No, I'm not going to give you a question. I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir,
go ahead.
Can you state categorically that nobody... No, Mr. President-elect, that's not
Go
appropriate.
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord. The legendary Wall Street genius Wilbur Ross here. He's our Secretary of Commerce. We have Gary Cohn, who is the president of Goldman Sachs. No nation on earth has an interest in seeing this band of criminals arm itself with nuclear weapons and missiles. The United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime.